Hello, I'm Sister Mary Media. I'm in the San Francisco house of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, and I was joined in 1979 when we started the group. So I didn't so much join as participated in the birth. I've been wondering myself why I'm considered a original instead of a founder. I guess it's because the way the iconography has evolved is that the four people who lived in the convent in the early days are considered the founders, and those of us who lived around the corner in a house full of sisters, known as the Brain Trust, no irony there, were considered originals. So I guess, yes, the four people who lived in the convent and kind of lived it 24 hours a day instead of 23 hours a day are considered the founders. But, you know, it's how many angels dance on the head of a pin. I mean, it's a fine distinction in my eyes. Okay. As with any religious organization, there are different origin myths, okay? And so the one that we've been settled on is that three men, donned habits and went out to Land's End on this very day in 1979, Holy Saturday in 1979. They just got a lot of attention, and that was the birth of, they realized that it was something that could be useful, and that was the birth of something. The three people involved in that were people who became Sister Vicious Power Hungry Bitch, Sister Missionary Position, and Sister Resurection. Okay, so that was on Holy Saturday, 1979. Later on, some other people joined them, namely Sister Hysterectoria and the Reverend Mother, the Abbess. They were the other two people who lived in the convent. They donned the habit and did some appearances at like the Castro Street Fair and things like that. And so, so those are the four who were doing nuns' habits. Now, gay men have done nuns' habits since time immemorial. I mean, if you look at the history of queer men and our relationship to the goddess religion, queer men were active in the nature religions, in the early religions, and so gay men have always had a spiritual connection to their queerness, and to having a kind of feminine manifestation of that history. And so for me, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, yes, they had that like lark on Holy Saturday, and you know, that was all very well and good. But it wasn't until after the first fairy gathering, which was on Labor Day, like 4 months later, 4 or 5 months after that first appearance, the first fairy gathering happened in Arizona, and a bunch of people from San Francisco connected in a spiritual way at that gathering, connected in a space and in a field of queer consciousness, of fairy consciousness. And so we realized at that time that there was something else to being queer. There was another way to manifest being queer that was much richer than the kind of fetishization of masculinity that was going on in the gay culture at the time. And so when we got back to San Francisco, that's when we started, well, how do we manifest this in an urban setting? You know, we took this giant step outside the patriarchy, and it had this kind of religious experience, spiritual experience together. Well, what do we do with that? How do we convey that to the community, to the larger community, once we are back in, you know, our urban settings? And so, well, we've been doing some nuns. We've been doing nun drag. That gets a lot of attention. Why don't we try something like that? And so that's how in my telling, that's sort of the origin of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Because for me, it's the sisters as an order are not just like putting on drag and going out and doing, you know, being theatrical. It's about manifesting a queer consciousness. It's about taking what we know to be a richer sense of who queer people are and bringing it out into the world. So that's what the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is, not just a bunch of guys doing nun drag. So the reason I became a sister, I was interested in becoming a sister and doing something with these other people, was that I felt that we were limiting ourselves by just kind of focusing on electoral politics, you know, in the queer movement. I thought, I moved to San Francisco from Montreal, where I was a queer activist. I managed the androgyny bookstore and was involved with Gay Montreal, a queer organization, social organization, and political organization. And I moved here because San Francisco Bay Area is where it wasn't just a queer political movement that was being born, it was a cultural movement, a spiritual movement. It was the place where spirituality was fused with queer culture and queer politics. And it made for that richer alchemy that the sisters kind of adopted and explored. I think organizations appear when they're needed. So I feel that the sisters, by being composed of gay men and later at the beginning, but gay men and women, were somehow tapping into, in the unconscious, a need for preparation for something that was to come. I really believe that that's what was going on. And that when the need arose, a few short years later, with the AIDS epidemic, we had ways of modeling, let's say, ways of connecting with each other that were beyond just using each other as sexual playmates. And so I feel that for me, the role of the sisters is to tap into the unconscious needs and possibilities inherent in the queer people, in the queer culture, and to manifest what needs to be manifested in their time. And I feel that, yes, we were an expression of the period, but I think that other periods have seen queer organizations respond to the challenges and the needs and the unconscious yearnings of their own generations. I feel the sisters did achieve a lot of what we set out to do. I mean, when we created the Play Fair pamphlet, for example, which was which is now regarded as kind of a pioneering community-based response to a health crisis. The health crisis at the time was pre-AIDS and slightly, but it was sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, it was STDs. And so we were responding to that. And I feel that our response to that, which was rooted in who we were, in a rigorous examination of, well, what's needed here? I mean, what does the community need? They need information that speaks to them, that doesn't use the clinical language that was being used to convey information from health departments. And they certainly didn't need the censorious attitude that you shouldn't be doing this. You brought this on yourself. And so stop behaving that way. Well, fuck off. We're not going to stop behaving that way. And so we modeled a response to the health crisis that was rooted in the identity and the needs of the people at that time. And so, yes, I think that was an early instance in which we demonstrated the use of a queer consciousness. I mean, because we were choosing to look not just at what was going to get us what we needed in a political way. It was like, what is really going on here? And our message at that time wasn't, here are the remedies to the health problems you have. Our message was, play fair, take care of each other, be loving towards each other. This is what we, so in that sense, I think we modeled a queer, caring, empathetic way of being with each other that comes natural to queer people. I think we're naturally empathetic. It's that empathy that we could put into action in the health crisis to start off with, and then continued on for, the past 41 years. That, yeah, I guess I would say that we have achieved something. And I do think the community sees us not just as, tacky drag queens. They see us as spiritual, they see us as a spiritual presence. They respond to us that way. And it kind of like, I tear up when people kind of reflect that back to us and say, oh, the sisters are here, we can, now the party can start. So I was a sister until about the mid-'80s, and then I took a leave and rejoined about 5 years ago actively. So I've been a sister. I've technically been a sister for 41 years. And of that, maybe 25 were passive as opposed to active sister. Well, the reason I left the sisters in the mid-'80s was, there were a number of reasons. One was we all had our hands full being in support groups for people who were dying, in, caring for people in our own personal circles, which didn't necessarily intersect completely with the sisters. I had other circles of friends that, but some of my sisters were dying and they needed support. So I felt like that that there were more direct ways of being of service than in the more public, community-oriented, group-oriented manner that the sisters were. So there was that. To be honest, there was also a sense of less connection to the group because there were dear friends of mine in the Sisters who had left and gone to live in New York or other places. So I didn't feel quite the kind of well-knit social connections that I had earlier. And to be honest, I felt that there were some people who were drawn to the order not for the purpose of service and manifesting a queer consciousness and making a change in the culture, not just in their own lives. And they were attracted by the kind of fame and notoriety that the Sisters had gotten. So I felt like I didn't mesh with the kind of the reasons behind what drew people to the Sisters entirely. And so for all of those three reasons, and also I had a business that demanded time because, you know, being a sister is a full-time job, as you know, and it doesn't pay, as I'm sure you also know. In fact, it costs. And so for those 4 reasons, I guess, I felt, okay, that's kind of run its course. And I kind of pulled back and I didn't really stay connected to the Sisters for the next couple of decades. The 30th anniversary, some of the Sisters reached out and included some of my artwork. I did a lot of being Mary Media, I had done a lot of the graphics that was used by the early, in the early days, like flyers and posters and stuff like that. And so there was an art exhibition at one of our local museums, and so they were using some of my artwork. So they reached out to kind of connect with me, and I got to do one of my dance numbers, the Stand By Your Man lip sync that I resurrected, where Sister Loganberry was the man on the cross that I was standing by. And so it was fun. So I enjoyed that. And Sister Hysterectoria was in town, and we did, I've been working for a long time on a musical about the Sisters, and so we did some of the songs from that for the conclave. And so I thought, oh yeah, I mean, I remember this group. I really like them. So so that kind of got me connected, and then so about by the time of the 35th anniversary, 5 years later, it was like, okay, I was retiring at that point, and I had more time on my hands, and so I got involved again. I love people who are drawn to the Sisters, because it's a calling, you know. It involves so much work, really, and commitment, that unless you really feel that this really expresses who I am, and this is an opportunity for me to contribute to give to others from sort of the deepest part of myself, I feel I love the people who have joined the Sisters and who are drawn to that, to use that kind of creative mode to be of service. And so I feel like I've gained like this huge supply of new friends. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think at this point in time, I don't expect as much of myself as I did in the early days. It's like, I feel like I'm willing to respect my own limits of energy, but I feel like I'm always kind of still always doing more than I wanted to do and making commitments because there is a lot to, because there's a lot to accomplish. There's a lot of, there are huge needs that are not being addressed. And so it's not just that, there's huge opportunities for fun and for connecting with my sisters. So I'm always treading a fine line in terms of how much energy I'm willing to devote to being a sister and how much energy I need to attend to other parts of myself, because I write plays and I'm trying to keep involved with a theater community, and I'm involved with a gay Buddhist group, and so I'm trying to keep the sisters kind of front and center in many ways, but recognize that I can bring more to the sisters if I also feed other parts of myself. And so, but I have to tell you, like whenever I'm getting in face, almost all my roommates can attest to this. It's like, I'm, stomping around the house. Why did I agree to do this? I don't have time for this. Doing this again. I hate this. It's like, and then I get into face, and it's like, and I get out into the community or connect with my sisters. And it's like, I love this. It's like, this is nothing, there's nowhere else I'd rather be, And so it's schizophrenic, and I embrace the schizophrenia. Now in my resurrected self is passing along the connection to the early days, because it's one thing for people to read about what happened in the early days. It's something else for somebody to say, that's not how it happened. And so I love passing along to my sisters the history of the order, and as a sister out in the community, I love passing on to other people the sense that there are much more ways of being in the world, of expressing who you are as a queer person, and like not paying attention to gender or paying full attention to gender, whatever serves you, to embrace so many other ways of expressing who you are out in the world. And that there's a history of people, there's a long history of people and we're even connected to, strains of queer history that preceded us. We were one iteration in a flowing river of queer consciousness. And so to try to encourage people to embrace that and to see the possibilities and to realize that it's not all about RuPaul's Drag Race and, being in bars and stuff like that. The Sisters are a street ministry. That's how we started out. By appearing in the street, a group of people all dressed as nuns, clearly connected, so we're modeling community. We're modeling connection just by appearing together and being a group out on the street, which is rare. I mean, often out on the street, everybody's going about their individual business. Here is suddenly this group of people who are sort of dressed the same, who sort of like have the same similar makeup. I mean, in the beginning, it was much more, we did look the same. We all wore exactly the same habits. We all wore exactly the same non-makeup. We were all mishfaced in the beginning. there was glamour. It didn't take long for glamour to make its way. But this group of people appearing, who are clearly like they're connected, transforms the energy of the street. It suddenly gives people, we're clearly engaged in some act of the imagination, and so it's encouraging everybody around us to engage in an act of imagination as well. So all the hunky gym muscle guys suddenly turn into little Catholic schoolgirls who need to be spanked. It's like it transforms the energy, and it gives people encouragement to, oh, what else could be going on here? So I love the street ministry aspect of the sisters. My advice to people who are joining the order, to a new sister, is go deep. Go deep inside yourself to find the possibilities, and to find the needs, and to find the modes of expression that will be in service to those needs and to who you are. I mean, don't settle for coasting and pro forma appearances. When you do a ritual, get deep into, like, what does fire mean? What does, why do we use incense? Why do we, who are these names from the past that we are invoking? Go deep and find out, just how much what you're capable of, because there's a huge richness there, especially if you're somebody who is called to service in the sisters. There's something deep going on in there. Find out what it's about.